Welcome in, everybody, to Esports Weekly. I'm Ryan Bailey. I'll be your host as per usual. And if you've been listening to Twitter, there's been a little bit of rumblings that today's episode is going to be a big one, and they were correct. We're going to kick it off. We got a bunch of breaking news coming into Esports Weekly. These are real SPL roster changes that are happening right now. Of course, we'll still be going over what happened last week, United's big week in their SPL performances, and of course what you can expect in these games coming up Thursday and Friday. But we're going to start with the most newsworthy thing, which is that the Pittsburgh Knights are making a roster change. Zeros out of the mid lane, moving out of the roster. We will have exclusive interviews with Emilzy and other members of this team coming up in just a little bit. Their correspondent, John Finch, will fill us in on exactly what is going on. So make sure you stay tuned to figure out who is filling that seat for Zeros. But first, I want to start with what we saw last week. And that's that this E-United team, a team that, frankly, I myself have had a lot of question marks about how consistent can they be? What's their top end even like? They really showed up last week. They had an impressive performance, 3-0 over the Pittsburgh Knights that maybe ends up contributing a little bit to this. But again, we're going to get back into that in just a little bit. And then a very impressive performance up against Rival despite losing. And I think that's what's important to keep in mind here is that despite a loss against Team Rival's the number one seed, and they will be the number one seed going into the World Championships. They're basically locked up there, not mathematically quite yet, but they've got a bunch of games against the lower end of the SPL. Rival's going to lock up top seed. And even still, E-United went up 2-0 in that set. So I don't think E-United fans or E-United players should be too disappointed with how that set turned out. Yes, a loss is a loss, but in the plus-minus it matters, especially with how clumped up that middle of the pack is right now. Those game plus-minuses are going to be very, very critical moving forward. And it was an impressive performance against PK on Thursday. But I've got one concern after watching all of this. When you watch the games against Pittsburgh Knights, E-United didn't beat them three different ways. E-United didn't do a whole lot different. They came in with one game plan and played it really, really well, and Pittsburgh Knights did not adjust. And so the 3-0 against PK, certainly impressive. But we know that PK was clearly having some problems, or else we wouldn't see this change happening. Maybe E-United's going to have to get a couple more strategies in the bank. But still, a 3-0 there certainly counts for your plus-minus. And then, of course, your Rival setup. That was a team that adjusted in Team Rival, and we saw how much of a difference that can make in the grand scheme of these games, just how much adjustment these teams can make. But E-United, Tully's been up here saying, their correspondent on the desk, that this team could be top three. And I go, okay, maybe, but I'm not really seeing it. I'm starting to see it now. I'm starting to get there. E-United's a team you got to keep in mind. This is what happened in Week 8. It wasn't just E-United, of course. LG did cement their space above Space Station Gaming. SSG did get a game, and their roster swap looks a little bit better. Not roster swap, but role swap does look a lot better for them. I love the idea of putting Bera in mid and Andy in that long lane. Space Station, look, they have been the worst team this year, no doubt. They are now your definitive 10th seed. However, I think that team still has too much talent to be at number 10. And I think that this team could make noise come those HRX placement weeks. That is November 3rd through the 8th, I believe. With this roster change, they look a little bit better. Maybe I'm starting to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit too much. I get it, but I don't know. I'm seeing it a little bit from Space Station. There's a glimmer of hope there, a new dawn potentially with Barracuda moving into that mid lane, being reunited with Jeff Hindla, doing what they have done best their whole careers, which is lane really, really well. And then you give it over to Andy, making plays by himself in that long lane. I don't know. Maybe. It's a big maybe, but we will see. It's certainly a possibility, I think, for Space Station to improve because they can't get a whole lot worse right now. There's a silver lining, I guess. Of course, we do have our top 5 plays coming to you courtesy of Respawn. A bunch of great plays last week. We're going to kick it off with number 5. Dimmy has been making plays. Whether or not Outcold Gaming has been winning a whole lot at the minor league level, don't worry too much about that. This is a big game for Outcold against a team they're very favored against, and Dimmy gets in there and steals the Fire Giant alongside new support Breeze. Dimmy's pretty good at Smite. You might have heard of him, kind of won back-to-back world championships. You'll find out about him later on, I'm sure. Number 4 is another objective steal. We've had a lot of those this week, not only this week, but all year long, basically. Deathwalker. Can you tell Finch worked on these lower thirds, by the way? How terrible. Clap. That's a nice little animation there. The clap, steal a gold fury. That was kind of cute. All right, I'm with you on that one, Finch. Number 3, also another solo laner that's in the minor league, but has played on World Championship caliber teams and been a really good player. It's Maniac, of course. I'm talking about a clean quadra kill for the boy on this Jormungandr, again against a Horizon Union team that is starting to step up. These minor league squads, particularly in Europe, looking very, very good so far this year. Not against Maniac here, as he sealed the set victory with that quadra kill at number 3. Number 2, we've got Deathwalker. What, Deathwalker Ricochet? Is that what I'm reading right here? That seems surprising to me. But number 2, certainly Death Panther. Oh, it does say Deathwalker on my sheet for what it's worth, but it's my fault regardless. Hey, is Ho Yi still good? Hey, John Finch, is Ricochet a good ability? He says it's pretty good. Checks out by me. Death Panther, excuse me for that. Again, an SPL level player, a lot of minor league level plays. You should be tuning in on Tuesdays. That's what this is telling me from the top 5 plays. And then number 1, Captain Twig making those plays. Canada from Canada somewhere sighing because Captain Twig wins the game for Team Rival. The patience on the beads is what really gets me on this play. Quad taunt into quad kraken and a triple kill for Captain Twig, and then his brain immediately goes to Gold Fury, and his team's like, no, dude, we win. Like, let's just head over to Fire Giant or something like that. It's going to be a lot easier now that you made a big play like that. Again, top 5 plays brought to you by Respawn. Let's take a look at the schedule for this week. We're going to kick it off tomorrow, Dignitas versus Obey Alliance on Thursday, and then Splice SK, which is actually a very big matchup because this is your 6 versus 7 seed, and top 6 go immediately to HRX. So that's a critical one for Splice to win. Renegades then get their chance against Obey on Friday, and then Dig SK. So a big week for the SK boys. Of course, we will have Tom Baddinger here in studio to talk about that team as he is their correspondent. But if you missed the top of the show, our leading story, breaking news, Pittsburgh Knights, roster change, Zero's out in the mid lane. Who's going to replace him? What's going to go on? How did this happen? We have all of that information and more here for you on Esports Weekly, so make sure you stay tuned. Some big interviews coming up right on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. The big story of this week is the Pittsburgh Knights making a roster change, taking Zeros out of that mid lane. We're here to tell you exactly who's going to replace him. Of course, with the roster locks, you can't pick anyone up. So Pittsburgh Knights have to make do with what they have. And what they have is Rowe waiting on the sidelines. But he's not going to be playing mid. It's going to be Rowe in the solo lane with Deathwalker moving into the mid lane. This will be the Pittsburgh Knights configuration for the rest of this phase and going into the Smite World Championships. This is an official roster move that has been filed in to the SPL offices. So a big change for PK, and it comes at quite the surprise. I mean, PK had a lot of expectations coming into this year, and maybe they haven't lived up to those, but this is still a successful team. They've been doing very, very well. So what prompted this change? We had a chance to sit down with some Pittsburgh Knights members and talk about just that.
There's like 2 major issues with it. one thing was the whole attitude problem around the team. I think there was a lot of personality clashes. And the other thing was just how the game is played right now. And from our perspective, I just don't think all of the players on the team were on the same page when it comes to how to play that meta. Those things just kind of culminated. We had a team meeting and things really didn't go down well there. And that was kind of when I knew, like, I don't think we're gonna win Worlds with this roster.
We brought together this superstar roster. We knew there would be personality clashes. We spoke about it before we started. Decided to be open, honest with each other, and work on everything. It got better for a little while, but the game was also easier for us at the start of the year. For a while, we figured out things before some other teams did, and when it got a bit harder, the team environment became more tense and we started to have issues. Every time when things got tough, it would get a lot worse, and it was a miserable environment for everybody. There was no productivity. We couldn't learn, we couldn't develop ourselves within a meta. It took long to even catch up to the meta at some stages. So at MSI, there was a big meta change. We decided to make a change along with that, with swapping Vote to the mid lane and Zeros to the long lane. It worked for a little while in scrims. It brought back some of the energy in the team, but ultimately it made the personality clashes a lot worse for whatever reason.
Like, we had a lot of meetings with, like, mainly revolving around attitudes and just like how much people are actually putting into like practice or just putting into the game in general. And pretty much every time like his attitude would be brought up, most of the times people always just had something negative to say about him. I don't know, it just wasn't working too well with him, I guess. Everyone would like agree on one thing, and he'd be like, no, that's not how it goes. Like, this is how we play it. So it was either his way or no way, really. We always had to kind of play around him. He'd never be the one playing how we wanted to play. We even role swapped before, like with Zeros and Vote, and I mean, it's still nothing helped. So, I don't know if it's a desperation play or something, but it feels like the right thing to do.
I feel like the biggest challenge is going to come to us, the team as a whole, because we've been knocked down so much throughout this year, and obviously our team environment now is much happier than it was before. But what happens if we get knocked down again? Are we going to feel like we made a mistake because we can't go back? Are we going to feel like it's over for the year? Are people going to give up? I don't know, really. But there's a huge challenge for me to grind and become the sole laner I need to be. I feel like Deathwalker has less of a challenge at mid laner because I think he's actually already pretty damn good. But as a team, I think that's when the biggest challenge will come, is when the hard times come, how are we going to react?
I'd say it's more pressure on me and Ro. I wouldn't say it's much pressure on everyone else. I just feel like in the end it's like kind of a team effort. So if I don't perform too well or say I'm doing something wrong, like someone else should also say it, you know, it shouldn't be just me. But at the same time, like I think I should work super hard to like try and get it right, you know, try and perform like up to expectations, I guess, for what a top mid laner should be at the time.
I actually think it's Deathwalker. I think it relies a lot on him. Just because the main mental disconnect was in the 3v3 in mid, and that whole thing, there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of expectation that now everything is going to be solved. But at least for the first like 2, 3, 4 weeks, it's still going to be rough, right? Like someone's getting used to a new role. There's all these matchups, there's all these little things. Do I go for the red buff before the wave? That's a big thing. And then there's like, he just has to learn a lot of new guards as well, right? So he has the biggest challenge because it's a double-sided challenge. Like he's learning new guards, but he's also learning a new communication role. Whereas I think, again, solo is like less impactful in a way. Ro just has to learn matchups. He already played solo a lot. So I don't think he kind of has to pick up the guards in the same way that Deathwalker does. So I actually think our team success is more reliant on Deathwalker than Ro. If Ro is going to do average and just hold lane and be impactful in team fights, it kind of comes down to what we can do in the 3v3 in mid, and then obviously Vote is going to be a carry player, right? How high of an impact can he have? So a lot of this is on Deathwalker, but he's grown so much this year. I'm like really proud of him, how he's grown as a person, like both inside and outside the game. And I think if anyone can take on this responsibility, it's him.
The Pittsburgh Knights, a favorite for the fans and a favorite to maybe win Worlds, making big changes just a couple weeks removed from the Smite World Championship. Make sure you stay tuned. We're going to have John Finch, Pittsburgh Knights correspondent, coming in and telling us even more detail about what's been happening behind the scenes for this squad. Stay tuned here on Esports Weekly.
Hunter reporting in. Specimen acquired. I don't know why you put such a high price on these things. They barely put up a fight. I'm en route to the drop point for payment and transfer. I want these things off my ship. I don't trust a job this easy. Hunter over and out. Don't keep me waiting.
Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. The big breaking news, Zero's out from Pittsburgh Knights. Deathwalker out of the solo lane and into the mid lane, where Ro will step in and be the new solo laner. To talk about it, we have the correspondent for the Pittsburgh Knights, John Finch, joining us here on the desk. Finch, I mean, this is massive news, and there is not that much time before Worlds.
No.
We'll get into the kind of implications of that in just a moment, but this new roster, I mean, how did all this happen?
I mean, there clearly was discord between these two teams. You heard the way, or not between these two teams, but on the team, you heard the way that they were talking about attitude. Really seemed like the primary thing from what I was hearing from these guys, that they didn't seem to agree maybe about how they should be handling it when they had losses, about what should be played in this new meta. And for what it's worth, I do think that there are some players in particular who are out of sorts in this meta. And I don't think that there's a chance that maybe it's just Zeros. I have said that I think Jeff Hinla, this is not his primary meta, and things like that. So I think that is a valid sort of argument to be made, but this move is so drastic to me, man. I mean, I know they still feel confident, but I think this really, really hurts their chances of being a top-tier team, so they must have felt like this is the only way to go.
That has to be the way, right? I mean, this is such a big change. I mean, Zero has been such a big name in the scene for so long.
Yeah, dude. He's still sick, I say.
It's got to be that same mentality, right? That we just feel like we cannot win. Does this hurt our chances to win? It can't, because we already felt like we had no chance to win. It's the only way that I think I can look at it through a lens that makes sense to me. So let's take a look at the new roster as a whole. Deathwalker in the mid lane, Ro in solo. I mean, is this the right way that you would have done it? Do you think you would have tried to just force Ro into the mid lane?
I don't think so. I think that what you do whenever you make changes like this is that you do try and put your strongest player is the one that you put the biggest burden on. And I think that's what they've done here with Deathwalker. They put him into a playmaking position for this team, and they're going to let Ro, I mean, let's be honest, right about now with the way the meta is, you can kind of be on a bit of an island in solo lane. It's a while before you impact the game. If your mid laner is struggling, though, I don't see a path to victory right now. It's just so important. It's such a difficult position, and I hate saying that to your face, but it is
Yep.
so tough, and you have to position so well and pick your spot so well, and I think Deathwalker's the kind of player that can do that. Obviously, there's going to be some growing pains, but my man PandaCat made it look easy, didn't he? I mean, I know it wasn't, I know it was not, but he really made that work for him, making that same swap. Deathwalker is just as talented a player. I think he can make it work.
Now, this is not Ro's first foray into the competitive scene. He played competitively in Australia for a long time,
right.
Was a premier player in that region. Of course, that region not as strong as the SPL, but still certainly had some success there, but mostly as a jungler. Have you gotten a chance to go back and watch any of Ro's tape or anything like that? What do you think he'll bring in solo?
I think that Ro has a good chance. He's the one that I usually get to talk to when I talk to the Knights. And one thing that I can tell you guys about Ro is that this dude does stay really level-headed. And I think that's going to be huge for them. And I think it is going to be a big difference compared to what might have been happening in their comms before. If what they've been telling us is any indication. Even if things are going wrong, it's so much better to have someone like Ro there who is willing to follow the calls, who's willing to go along with whatever the team's strategy is. I think that's going to help them out a lot. Obviously, he's going to have some trouble. I think solo is a really crowded field right now. There's a ton of really strong solo laners.
No doubt.
And that could potentially be a bit of a problem for them. They're not going to be looking at Ro, I think, to be a big playmaker coming out of solo lane ahead 2 levels. They need Ro to tread water, come over, and do the basic things your solo laner does. And I think that this team still does have a shot with those other 4 players, but hard not to say it's diminished.
Now, Deathwalker into the mid lane. I mean, we've kind of said that he might not has been as impactful as we kind of expected from him coming into this year. Maybe that's unfair, but we certainly expected a lot from Deathwalker this year. How do you think he'll fare into the mid lane?
Well, I think he has a really good shot. I mean, he has been kind of streaming some mid lane here and there, hasn't he?
Yeah, off-roll, by the way.
Off-roll. We've been getting a little bit of glimpses out there, so I know some of the Deathwalker stands probably recognize it. But I think that there are some things that Deathwalker does really well that can work in the mid lane too, which is that he has this really good eye for team fights, and that's what you need to have if you're a mid laner too. Because, like you always say, you really only get one shot with your biggest abilities in a team fight as a mage, not like a hunter, so you need to be able to pick those spots really carefully. Deathwalker's the kind of person I think has always had that eye on where the primary persons that we need to be taking care of, what my role is for preventing that. Some of those same things translate. He won't be an unkillable machine like normal, though, so the positioning is going to have to be a little bit of a test for him.
This is definitely the least amount of farm he'll have ever gotten in his whole
yeah, that's
career.
another good point. Is he going to be used to being level 13?
No, it never gets easier, let me tell you. So you were saying that you think this hurts their Worlds chances.
I do, yeah.
What would you have said their Worlds chances were before the change, and what do you think they are now?
Well, I had faith in this team to be able to get back on track moving into Worlds. A team with a Mealsy and Adapting On and Deathwalker and Vote and all these talented players certainly had a chance if their hats are in the ring. I think they had a really good shot to at least go to something like semis, if not make a big run for finals. Now, if I'm being honest, I'd be surprised if they made it that far into the competition. They're obviously already high enough to where they're going to get their shot, and if that's all they work on from now to then, I expect them to be in a really good spot, but everyone else is doing the same thing, and they've been together in their roles this whole time.
It's an absolutely crazy move to make so close to Worlds. I mean,
it is, man.
We're going into week 10 or week 9, one of the two.
Yeah, I think we're going into week 10.
And so it's going to be difficult to really get it all locked in and in place. John Finch, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be hearing quite a bit about this change for a little bit longer after this. Now, if you want even more detail, the Pittsburgh Knights do put out a mini documentary series called Virtue that follows the PK Smite team in and out of game. A new episode is releasing tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, so make sure you follow the Knights on Twitter at KnightsGG. I'm told there's going to be a lot of information there and a good glimpse on inside the team and what may have led to this. So make sure you tune into that. Again, Virtue Mini Doc Series, 5 p.m. tomorrow evening at KnightsGG on Twitter if you want to find more information on that. Now, it's not just the Knights. We've got a ton of other teams in the SPL, and we've got to go over their sets. So make sure you stay tuned. We're going to go over what's to come this week in the SPL.
Hunter reporting in. Specimen acquired. I don't know why you put such a high price on these things. They barely put up a fight. I'm en route to the drop point for payment and transfer. I want these things off my ship. I don't trust a job this easy. Hunter over and out. Don't keep me waiting.
Pleased to meet you, human. I don't have a spirit animal because I am a spirit animal. Stay back or you will not like what happens next. You never know what we might be up against. This should keep us safe. Humans think I'm indifferent, but I just don't have any thoughts left to give.
Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. Now, with all this news about what's going on in the PK roster change, we've had to do some condensing here on the show. And luckily, a couple of our correspondents have teams that they cover facing off against one another, one of which being Graham Hinduman Hatfield, who's joining us right now on the show.
Hi.
You are covering both Dignitas and Obey Alliance this year.
Yep.
And they get to play each other this week.
I also inherited another team as well, which I always forget.
You sure did.
LG, right?
Yeah, you inherited LG.
I just get the dumpster fires. Pretty much except David, I guess. They're the only dumpster fire that's not really a dumpster fire yet. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh my God.
Drama breaking right now. No.
I'm getting whiplash all over. I mean, first PK, now what's going on
ready?
here?
Biggie into the solo lane, Variety to the duo lane, Trickstack as a coach.
I did see Variety tweet at Biggie, am I next? So could be something to watch
We're only
out for.
one Australian in the league at a time, okay? First of all, can he even find a win? I know I'm getting on PK all of a sudden, but can he even find a win? That'll be the first Australian win.
Big dub. Hey, he's already won as coach. They've both done a lot of winning as
That's
coaches.
true, as coaches, but come on, players is a different thing.
Sure.
All right, my team's real quick. Dig, they're probably going to 2-0 this week, and by 2-0 I don't mean 2 3-0s or maybe 3-1s, give or take. They take on Obey, first of all, on Thursday, and they also have a set against SK. Dig have been great all year. They recognize their inconsistencies. We've discussed that quite a bit. This team is very honestly knows where their issues are, and they've been working on them. The role switch is slowly working out for them. I expect business as usual from those guys.
Sure.
Obey, though, is a different story.
Yeah, Obey has what you have nicely called Hell Week right here. It's not going to be good for them.
Every week they hit me up and say, hey, what do you want to put as your little title thing? And I'm like, well, I mean, Obey don't really have a great week, do they? They go from Dig to Renegades. That's a day one oof. And a day two, what's worse than oof? It's just hell. Like,
yeah.
Renegades, the only way that could have got worse is maybe Rival. But then again, Renegades are just as good as Rival at the moment.
Now, the good news for Obey is that winning more or less does not matter right now, right? I mean, they aren't making it to Worlds automatically. They've got to get through placement week. So this is all about getting ready for that.
But that's what we're discussing. That's how bad this week is for them. They were like, well, it doesn't mean anything, so don't worry too much. Realistically, though, this team and what they need to go through right now, and what I was going to come on and say is that we have Weeknd as the leader of this team. He's one of the most recognizable faces in the league, as granted, as you know. The problem is with this team specifically, there's a lot of names on here that I recognize, but I don't feel like we have anyone steps up. I need a second member of this team to be a front runner, because I feel like the workload is kind of shared around here. Especially with Mineral now being on this team, he's going to take some work and some time to progress and get better. We need a member. Ducky, Wowie, and Moswell, all three of those players have the caliber and potential to be a secondary to Weeknd's lead here and take these games by the scruff of the neck. But I feel like it's very inconsistent. There's no one that's really coming to the forefront for me to like be the one to look at in this team and go, it's Weeknd and. You know what I mean? It's Weeknd and it's Wowie in the as, right? Well, Wowie's on this team, but he's an air in this team. And I'm not trying to, put down these players. I'm saying they need a second person on the same level where Weeknd's played this year. And that's weird for me to say because you know how Weeknd gets roasted all the time for his performances. He's in a damn good year.
He has when he sticks to the Assassins, by the way. I don't know about all that.
Hey, I've already discussed that on Twitter with him, yeah. The Guardian situation didn't really work out so well for him.
No, here are your predictions for their matchup up against Team Dignitas. That's an awful lot of yellow and black, as expected. And then against the Renegades later on, Obey also not favored, I think is the word choice I'll use.
They'll be fine.
They'll be fine. It's all about placements.
I think what it'll be is you'll see probably a little bit more experimentation out of Weeknd in the jungle a little bit to see if you can find a Guardian that works there. Or the next Assassin. Although Heartseeker, is that available this week? It is, right?
Yeah.
Heartseeker's back. Expect to see a lot of that everywhere. I actually, just talking about picks real quick, I'm expecting the rise of Neith. Be ready for it.
Ooh, Neith.
She's coming.
Could be the case. I'm looking at Amaterasu as a pick that's gonna jump out of nowhere for sure. Now let's move on to Team Dignitas. They also have a doubleheader that week. It isn't just against Obey Alliance. SK Gaming is their matchup on Friday, and this one's actually pretty big because SK is still not eliminated from that top 6.
And I think the reason this is a bigger conversation now is because of these Pittsburgh Knights roster changes too. There's a chance the Knights could be in a bit of a situation where SK could steal a spot from them. And for that to really start to happen, SK need to find ground quickly. This is a great week for SK in a strange way of looking at it. Because of these roster changes, they're like, hey, we've got a better shot of maybe making the top 6 and auto-qualifying for the World Championships. But it starts on Friday.
It really does, and it doesn't get any easier because they also have a game against Splice. This overall set for this week for SK is going to be huge, and they might be the team that benefits most from this PK roster change for sure. How does Dignitas match up against SK?
I think Dig is the one team where SK could find wins there as well. I think Dig are a good team at adapting for the most part, but their early game, if they can fall behind, I know there's been frustration with these players in the past on previous teams, not just this current one, where if they do fall behind, trying to gather momentum again and stay in contention in the game can be a downfall of theirs. SK have been spoken about a lot about how aggressive they are. Their early game is where they've been stronger. I think that's kind of moved away as the season's progressed because their early game hasn't been as fortuitous as it once was, but their mid and late game have progressed because they've been looking in that direction. They've lost a bit of their edge in the early. I think in the set against Dig, though, if they can go back to their edge with their early game, they might find more success against Dignitas here.
I'm also looking at that long lane. Hurwin's playing there now, and Zapman might be the most consistent member of SK Gaming these days. I think that's a matchup where Dignitas could get exploited.
Definitely, and I think that's going to be a lot of discussion then in the ranks of Dignitas about how they're going to play around that. The one thing about this Dignitas roster from an outsider looking in, you get a big window of the North Americans like to hunt Hurwin down because they know he's an emotional player. And I don't mean that in like he's going to boo-hoo afterwards. I mean like he plays based off how well his games are going.
Sure.
And you get under the skin of a player. It's part of competitive sports, part of competitive anything. Get under their skin. I do it all the time. And you find victories.
You're under my skin right now because I wanted to wrap the segment 10 seconds ago, but you kept talking. Great work, Graham. Thank you very much.
No problem.
And good luck to both of your teams because they're both playing doubleheaders this week. Big week for both of your squads and a big week for a lot of teams. But also, HRX is looming. Got a chance to sit down with some HRX champions earlier today. I'm wearing the same shirt. You'll see a preview of that just after this.
We're here live from Atlanta. The players are here. The stage is set. Let's get down for Esports!
This is where we also talk about the new stuff that we've got coming out for you all.
HRX is literally my favorite time of year. It truly isn't close. This is what I live for.
It's that second place. I can't wait to see what first place is.
It is HRX.
Welcome back, everybody. As I mentioned just before the break, had a chance to sit down earlier today, like right before this episode of Esports Weekly, with some Smite World champions and to talk about their experiences and how well they've played and what it was like to win Worlds. Maybe what did they buy with their first Worlds check? We covered a bunch of that kind of stuff. It's going to be coming out this weekend on the SMITEPro YouTube, but we have a sneak peek ready for you so you can check out exactly what it's like. Speaking on what Aurora was just saying, Season 3, that loss for you guys in Eager, you guys have all had the opportunity to win Worlds, but also some disappointing losses on the World stage. Is it true what they say that winning feels less good than losing hurts? You know, is it harder to lose those sets on that World stage?
I'll go first. Yeah, it just sucks. Everything about it sucks because right when you lose that final game, whichever one it is, like game 2 or game 5, it's just, wow, it's actually over.
Yeah.
Like, we tried so hard, except for Season 3. Season 3 loss felt fine because I felt that we had performed way better than that team should have performed because coming into Season 3, I remember talking to the boys and we were just like, it's not going to go well. Like, things just were not going well. And for some reason on the stage, we clicked and everything started working. But Season 2 hurt a lot. Season 4 hurt a lot because I was the main reason we lost one of those games. And then I think Season 5, we messed up the draft. So it was just like everything, like you have to play so perfectly because every team is so prepped and ready to go. And if you mess up one thing, you just get abused. Like the one that's freshest in my mind is Season 5 when Arkle just destroyed us.
Yeah.
Like, we had a terrible lane. We picked Athena for solo and then ended up going support. And I was watching him just like, this is not going to go well. We can't outfight them. We can't outpush them. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember that meta, the dual lane meta, which is just, you have to draft a strong dual lane or you get shafted. And we got shafted. I don't even think I finished stacking Devos by the time that game was over. Like, it was just brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly... I remember that set was the draft certainly didn't do you a whole lot of favors. I don't think
terrible
in that one. How about for you, Mike?
Just for like the losses in general.
Yeah, like what you've had the opportunity to win and see how that feels, but you've also had some losses.
I kind of cheat this question a little bit because Season 3 was the first year I made it with ALG, and we had that like basically 2 weeks before Gauntlet, that team was created. Like we took me, Cyclone, and Oceans off of NV and joined Stealth and Weekend. So we went into like the Gauntlet, like zero expectation, super loose, like, you know, kind of just doing whatever we wanted to see what happened. We ended up 5-0-ing it and like smashing everybody, and we made Worlds, and it felt really good. But there was never like, we tried to perform as well as we could, but there was never the expectation that we were going to go into it and like be Eager or be Energy or whatever. Like, we were obviously going to try our hardest, but for like a 1-month-old team compared to those teams, it was just kind of like a long shot. So even though it was disappointing to lose, because we lost to Energy, which were, you know, then defending champions and about to be 2-time champions, it didn't like hurt that much. I would say the loss that hurt the most was probably last year, because I felt like I felt like we had a really like strong shot to repeat. Like we were scrimming Splice like every day, and I thought the scrims between our two teams were amazing. Like I felt like we learned pretty much every day. Some days there'd be some bad stuff.
You guys dominated us. It was like 4-50 or something. We won 4 games. They won like 50 games like in our scrims.
Yeah, so like we had a pretty dominant like summer split, and then obviously what happened with Venom Baskin and trading them, and then we had a really dominant fall split. We only lost to Splice in game 3 in a best of 3, and that was our one loss of the split. And I felt like we had maybe the strongest roster, if not one of them. And I felt like we had a lot of things prepped for that tournament that we never even like got to show or got to bring out. We kind of just had a really bad game 1 versus Trifecta, and we're on the back foot, and it kind of stopped us from doing what we wanted to do. I don't think we prepped as well as we could have for them. I think like we played a game of like trying to hide stuff, which obviously is just so horrible in hindsight. So that's the one that definitely hurts the most, because I feel like also we were on the side of the bracket with I think Rival and Energy didn't have Yemen, so we had assumed Rival was going to win that. And I really wanted to play Rival again because we played them at Worlds in Season 4, then we played them in Spring, then we played them in Summer, and I wanted to play them again. It would have been 4 lands in a row, and it would have been a nice little just rivalry between those two teams, and we didn't get to. I hate that I had to say that.
Nicely done, Mike. Nicely done.
Yeah, but yeah, I felt like it would have been a really good set, and I think we just kind of dropped the ball on everything. And there's, I've gone over the mistakes a little bit, but yeah, that's the only one that I'd say really, really hurt, because I felt like we had a good chance to do what Raf and his team did.
Sure. Raffer, how about for you?
I would say the only...
You want to see more of that roll queue, make sure you stay tuned to the SMITEPro Twitter. Believe that will be coming out this weekend. We'll also, of course, get to the mid laners and the solo laners. Still have that to get to. Make sure you stay tuned for that. And also stay tuned here on Esports Weekly. SK Gaming might be the team that benefits most from this roster change to PK, as they might be able to break into that top 6. We've got Tom Baddinger joining us right after this. Welcome back, everybody. This change to the SPL with Zeros out for PK, Rowe stepping into solo, and Deathwalker moving to mid is sure to make waves across the entire league, but maybe none more so impacted than the SK Gaming boys. To talk about it, we've got their correspondent, Tom Baddinger, joining us here in studio. Also the same situation as Graham. We had to do a little bit of squishing, and you're taking over the Splice correspondent job, so we'll talk about them as well. But first, I want to start with SK. This feels like a really good opportunity for a team that honestly needed some help if they wanted to break into top 6.
I mean, it feels like it, but going up against Pittsburgh Knights is not something that SK are going to be doing. They're going up against Splice this week, Rival the week after, and really the only relevant matches there, you're going to see Renegades take on Pittsburgh Knights. So as far as breaking into the top 6, it really has nothing to do with the Knights. It's up to SK themselves to win these matches in front of them. It is a false dream for sure. I think they see this, they go, oh, sweet, easy. They check the schedule and go, that has nothing to do with us. Damn it.
Sure. I mean, I guess my thought process is
very upset.
PK might be losing some more sets, meaning they drop, and that means if SK does play well, whereas before they would have needed some help because they were so far behind,
right,
this might be the help that they needed.
Renegades were probably going to win versus Pittsburgh Knights anyway.
Sure.
So that math I think is already done in SK's mind, and I think it is I think it's much better for SK to focus internally anyway. A lot of other teams I've sat up here and said you've got to look at your opponent and look externally. internally. SK Gaming have figured out their identity, and everybody knows what the opponents are doing. It's consistency. When I look at consistency, I look internally to the team. What's going on that makes this team up and down and up and down? In some ways, Space Station Gaming is an easier conversation because they're not good, champ. Move on. With SK, they are good, but why are they not always good? And that's where you get down into the nitty-gritty. Realistically, I think it is simply just one of these X factors, because it's not watching their games back. Everybody performs just at different times. And honestly, that's what we saw last year when they were called Trifecta. It's about getting hot at the right moment. I think SK, if they're going to win, have to catch on momentum. X Factor, this weird nonsense that, I'm supposed to give you a tangible thing. Sure. I'm sorry, SK, it's ethereal.
It's going to be tough, I think, right now for SK, because they do have two really tough matchups, Dignitas and then Splice.
Yes.
And I'm looking at Belair as one of those players that you mentioned that is really hot or cold, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of in between there for him.
Exactly, Belair, and that's been his moniker the entire time in the Pro League. So Belair is the one that I've been looking at because I've been looking at him for over a year a little bit. Paul left a little bit to be desired this year and has slowly, very maturely ramped up and is now kind of the Paul player that we have expected to see. So looking internally, SK Gaming needed to fix their jungle mid synergy because something broke during the offseason. It's fixed. Awesome. Zapman has also kind of stepped up and returned to form, and Neil also had some stutter steps, but I think that was more Neil learning and adjusting to the Pro League. Belair right here is absolutely the player that needs to kind of find the heavy lifting, and again, it's not about the matchup. He knows the matchups. It's not about the game knowledge. This guy is smart as hell. It's really just about capturing that essence. What makes you bring out the good stuff on a day-to-day basis? I mean, I'm not a coach, and that's the issue here, because I really think that it needs to be a conversation with the team, internally speaking. With that said, what's going to happen right now? I'm confident in the other four players. I think that the other guys, like I said, I've been waiting for Paul. I've been sitting here waiting, and I've been nice about it. Paul's here now. And now that Paul and Sam are kind of doing it, I've got big expectations for SK.
I think this is going to be a really big matchup for them. They played against Renegades recently, lost that set 3-1, but had a bunch of close games in it. I think that was as much as a loss can gain you some momentum, that one may have. They might lose a little bit of momentum against Dignitas based on these predictions that everyone has put in. Tom, you're leading Dignitas in this match. Why?
I am leaning Dignitas, and realistically, it was a 50-50 for me. I went Dignitas because, frankly, it's the safe pick. But I do think that SK Gaming are able to take this one if they are able to channel through the mid and the jungle one more time. The thing is, with Dignitas, their right side of the map is so strong, it'll be uphill for sure.
No doubt about it. And then it doesn't get a whole lot easier for SK because they've got Splice later on. I mean, this is another matchup where Splice has been looking a little bit good. How about from Splice's side of things, as you are covering them now? What have you heard from them?
Splice are unconcerned about the future. Whether they want to say they take it one game at a time or whatnot, Splice are the most confident team in the league. Absolutely. Renegades might have some fun, but at the end of the day, I think Renegades are a little bit more realistic is the term I'll use. Splice think that they will win every single game. That's absolutely a reality. SK Gaming versus Splice are winning. I think SK can beat Dignitas. It'll be an uphill battle. It'll be tough, but maybe it'll be 3-2 in Dignitas' favor. Splice are coming out, and they are making mincemeat out of SK Gaming. They're just that strong.
Splice is one of those top-end teams, but this is a big one because even though they feel like that, they're the 6th seed right now. So they are the team that's on the bubble, so to speak, that SK... If you're going to win one, this is the one to win, but I agree with you. It might be pretty difficult. I imagine that a lot of the casters feel the same way, and indeed they do. Splice across the board. It surprised me when I looked at the standings this morning and saw Splice in 6th. So this one is important. Maybe SK can come out with a little bit of gas.
And that's the key, is that it's important and it's Splice. Splice are a team that play up not to their opponent, but towards the headlines. And when it matters, that's when they play better. The World Championship. And so with that in mind, it's really tough for me to sit here and go, Zapman might do it to him. No chance. Scream's going to come out and win the game.
Splice has been doing a lot of that as of late, it feels like. Tom, thank you very much for joining us here and talking about some two teams that are very important. And everyone right now is looking up at the Renegades. They've got a game this week as well. Anatoly joining us right after this.
Pleased to meet you, human. I don't have a spirit animal because I am a spirit animal. Stay back or you will not like what happens next. You never know what we might be up against. This should keep us safe. Humans think I'm indifferent, but I just don't have any thoughts left to give.
Welcome back, everybody. The Renegades might not be number one in the standings, but in a lot of people's power rankings, they are. They have been on a really hot streak since the midseason invitational, and as a result are climbing the standings pretty quickly. We've got their correspondent Anatoly joining us here in studio. Toly, that was cute. Yeah. I kind of liked what you had going on right there. I mean, Renegades, we've been talking about it since midseason invitational. They look almost unbeatable right now.
I mean, they are unbeatable right now. No team has been able to defeat them thus far. 4 wins in a row up against Splice, LG, SK, and Rival. Oh, actually, not SK, sorry. But, like, they're finding the 4 victories, and they have a relatively easy opponent coming up against SK this week. And it's a difficult challenge, I think, for all of that team because they're currently struggling. They haven't found the victories against the upper echelon teams.
That is true. They actually do have the Obey Alliance this week, so you look like a team that that certainly should be in a pretty good spot to end up winning. I mean, Obey has certainly struggled, whereas Renegades have not. I sat down and talked to Raffer a little bit earlier for Roll Q, but he was telling me off the set that at this point, I mean, there's not a whole lot in showing anything that you might have to show for Worlds. It's more about staying the course, getting a good seed, of course, but it's more about keeping those strategies under wraps.
Yeah, Obey's not making it to Worlds, unfortunately, with their record being currently at 2-11. Their best possible record is 7-11, and that's not going to cut it to be in the top 6. The only 3 teams still battling for that 6th spot is Renegades, Splice, and SK Gaming. Still a couple of head-to-head battles to see how it's determined, but Obey, it's kind of like playing spoiler, and I think that you can never count them out with Weekend being in the jungle of what he's going to bring to the table.
No doubt. I mean, certainly a veteran presence there for them, but Renegades certainly have a lot of that on their own end. I mean, is this the team to beat in the entire SPL right now? Is everyone looking at Renegades?
It's looking like it. They didn't have the best Phase 1 start where they ended up 5-4, but to end that Phase 1, going undefeated at MSI, and now to transition into the Phase 2 with 4 set victories in a row, they are being looked at. A lot of teams are not necessarily copying their meta, but they're adapting their own styles, their starts, a little bit of the picks as well. A lot of mages in that long lane was deviated because of Funballer. Whether or not that was a Renegade's decision or a Funballer issue is left to be determined, but it seems that he's very comfortable on all those gods.
I mean, everyone on Renegade seems to be comfortable with everything they're playing, and a lot of teams are starting to copy it. I mean, the Thoth that Funballer was playing, a lot of teams are picking up. Yeah. The Onher for Dardez we've seen in every region down to the SCL and SML as well. I mean, the Renegades, I feel like if you're in this position, you have to start working on what beats the meta that you helped create. And I feel like that's a difficult spot to be in.
Well, they're going to see what Obey is going to be throwing at them because outside of the Onher for Dardas, it's also the Shibalanke, it's also the Moose and Cobb that he's playing quite often, and the mages coming out of Funball. A lot of Thoth. 6 games so far he's played the Thoth, but that's not to say he's not diverse, playing 9 different gods in 16 games.
Certainly a big god pool for a lot of these different players. That's what makes this team so difficult to play against a lot of the time, is their potential to switch it up on you and do a lot of different things. Has there been one player that stood out to you in this 4 games winning streak in Phase 2, maybe not even looking at MSI, but more the regular season, that's really stepped up their play and helped lead to this win streak?
I think it's Cherio's ability to not have to be the carry all the time. Like, when we look at all the slash lines of Renegades at the end of the game, Cherio's is not the one to be highlighted, but that's because the rest of his team is doing so much work in the late game. The draft of Renegades is not towards the jungler. It's towards the mid laner, it's towards that long lane, whether it's the hunter or the mage, and it's working out for them. Cherio is kind of that sacrificial lamb, but he's doing it very gracefully.
No doubt. And he also has a big god pool. He used to play a lot of Guardians, and his opponent this week, is still playing a lot of Guardians. Weekend has been playing things like Terra Jungle, Kumbhakarna Jungle.
Geb.
Do you think these, Geb, do you think these sorts of things might throw Renegades for a loop?
I don't think so. They've been definitely watching some of the games out of Obey. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if Cherio takes a shot in the dark and go for some Guardian jungles himself. Keep in mind, this is the guy that goes Kabrakan in the jungle. He's even run Artio before, I think, way back when. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's Guardian versus Guardian on this week.
Always potential for Cherry to pull out something very, very tanky up in front of him. Hindu Man was on, the correspondent for Obey Alliance, a little bit earlier. He was saying he needs someone else to step up from Obey Alliance. If you're from Renegade's perspective, who are you making sure that they don't have the opportunity to do that?
It's got to be Weekend. You got to shut down the jungler. That's where the momentum is driven. If you shut him down, Cherio doesn't have to be too worried about his slash line at the end of the game anyway. You can always expect Dardas and Funballer to do Dardas and Funballer things. Renegade should come out with a very clean 3-0 victory.
I'd be very surprised if it were anything but a 3-0 victory with how well Renegades have been playing, and it seems like the casters feel the exact same way, leaning heavily in towards the Renegades. Toli, I mean, are they going to lose another game this phase? I wouldn't be surprised if they finished with 4 losses on the year.
I mean, it's possible. They still haven't okay, now PK is a different story. They haven't faced PK, but I think that should be clean for them with the roster changes. They haven't faced off against United. That could be an interesting matchup for sure. They've beaten Splice, they've beaten Rival, which I think are those top 2 teams outside of Renegades and United PK. But this matchup in particular, if Renegades were to beat Obey and then SK were to lose literally one more set, doesn't matter what set it is, Renegades would qualify to be in that top 6 position.
I've got a good feeling you'll be seeing the Renegades at the Smite World Championship. I've got no doubts about that. Totally, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, we still have to go over the SCL and SML. A lot of movement and still a very competitive league in the minor league for both regions. Stay tuned. We'll go over it on the other side.
We're here live from Atlanta. The players are here. The stage is set. Let's get down for Esports!
Where we also talk about the new stuff that we've got coming out for you all.
Look, HRX is literally my favorite time of year. It truly isn't close. This is what I live for.
It's that second place. I can't wait to see what first place is.
It's HRX.
Hunter reporting in. Specimen acquired. I don't know why you put such a high price on these things. They barely put up a fight. I'm en route to the drop point for payment and transfer. I want these things off my ship. I don't trust a job this easy. Hunter over and out. Don't keep me waiting.
Welcome back, everybody. A big week in the SPL, but that doesn't mean you can afford to ignore what's happening on the Mondays and Tuesdays for the Smite Console League and the Smite Minor League. And let's start with catching you up on the SCL. We'll begin in PS4 Europe, where Aerial Arise continues to be the top end here. This was a region that was really dominated pretty easily by Outcold, it feels like. Outcold was your representative coming to the midseason invitational LAN, but ultimately ended up not doing so well here in Phase 2. They are 5-3 compared to Aerial Arise's 6-2. We'll see if AA can hold on to that top spot, because remember, only the top team in each region will be coming to that placement week for each console region. As for Xbox Europe, we already know who's coming. It's Team Rival. I could have told you that Team Rival was going to make it week 1 of Phase 1, and I might have gotten a little nervous in the middle because Dabo's Disciples looked like they were starting to pull out and be a real contender in this region. No longer. It is Rival choking out the competition here in Xbox Europe, no doubt. Now let's move on to North America. PlayStation 4 Nemesis. This was a team that didn't drop a single game in Phase 1. Now in Phase 2, the most competitive console region. It's been a real battle for that top spot. Right now, Nemesis is holding on, but they're looking a little bit like Mufasa right now. It's getting dangerous for sure, and Big Money Esports might just be Scar. 6-2 for both of these two squads. Plus minus does give the edge to Nemesis, so if they keep winning, they will be okay, but it's got to be 2-0s from here on out. It's got to be clean play. I still expect to see Nemesis, but it's not over by any stretch. And then in Xbox North America, much like in Xbox Europe, it's one team running away with it. It's Hype Unit. This team just continues to look better and better. Had a close-ish call with Fatal Ambition in Game 2 this week, but ultimately still was able to pull out the win. This is the best console team. They are the reigning champions. They look best to the eye test, and I'm excited to see what they can prove the rest of the year. Watch out, man. This team might make some noise at that placement LAN. That would be a lot of fun, and I'm hoping for it. Gotta root for my Xbox boys, you know? That's just the way it is. As for the minor league, things are staying very, very competitive there as well. We'll start with Europe, as Simplicity and Horizon Union had a big matchup, because Horizon Union has been really, really red hot as of late. And it started a couple weeks ago when they took Simplicity to the edge and lost. Unfortunately for Horizon Union fans, that was a repeat performance this week, as they did force a Game 3, 2 stomps, 1 each way, and then it was looking really, really good for Horizon Union, and then Maniac quadra-killed them. You might have saw that in the Respawn Top 5 plays to open the show. Look, this Horizon Union team has a lot of potential, but it might be too little too late. Need to hit top 2, and it's not looking good for the HU boys. 3-5 on the year. Simplicity hold up at 6-2. They are your top of the standings in Europe right now. As for North America, another expansion team is doing well, but even better than Horizon Union. It's Hype Unit that are up on top right now, but they've got 2 teams hot on their heels. It's Armada and Sanguine, certainly with potential. By the way, shout out to Meerkat. He asked for it, and he's going to complain if I don't give it to him. These 2 teams in Armada and Sanguine are chasing Hype Unit right now. Hype Unit has not looked quite as strong. They crushed Risky Behavior in their debut in the SML this week. Don't get me wrong, but if I'm Hype Unit, I'm making sure that I'm prepared for Armada and Sanguine, because both of those teams are looking like they are returning to form fairly quickly as of late. Again, top 2 in each region coming to that placement week LAN, all in the name of making it to the Smite World Championship. If you missed the top end of the show, we did have breaking news here on Esports Weekly. It's that Zero's out of the mid lane for the Pittsburgh Knights. Row from the coaching position over to the solo lane, because Deathwalker is the one who's going to step up and play mid for the PK roster. Only a couple weeks to go. They probably will still make Worlds, so they have some time in that window between the end of the regular season into the Smite World Championship. But man, it is scary if you're a PK fan right now. They're sitting pretty, though, 10-5, and that's why I think this kind of caught us all off guard. Third place team, looking pretty good, but felt like they couldn't win Worlds with the roster as it was currently constructed, so they decide to make the change. If you want to see a little bit more on that, I've got some information coming for you. First, though, we got to take a look at that schedule. Starting off tomorrow, Dignitas up against Obey Alliance at 11 a.m. Then a huge game between Splice and SK Gaming. You just saw it on the standings right there, that Splice is your bubble team right now, sitting at 8-5 compared to SK's 6-8. SK might be the team that benefits the most from this PK roster change, as they might end up losing a couple games towards that top end. They won't drop out, it doesn't look like, at this rate. Maybe they needed PK to beat some of the teams that they're a little bit closer to, like Renegades, like Splice, like E-United. We'll find out either way. Again, more information, Virtue, a mini documentary series the Pittsburgh Knights have been making about the team in and out of game all year long. New episode premiering tomorrow at 5 p.m. Make sure you stay tuned at KnightsGG for that information. Of course, if you want more information about the SMITEPro League, at SMITEPro on Twitter is the place to go. You can follow me at Agro, and we'll see you next time here on Esports Weekly. Thanks for watching.